In-state insult. That is the topic of today's video. My name is Craig Meister. I'm a college admissions coach. You can learn more about me and how you can work with me one-on-one throughout the entire college admissions process on my website, which is collegemeister.com. What am I talking about when I say in-state insult? Well, let's say you are a resident of a particular state in the United States of America, and you have been a tax-paying resident of that state for 10, 15, maybe 25 years. And you happen to have a child who is interested in attending the flagship land-grant university in that state, the public university in that state that maybe has the lowest of all acceptance rates of all the other public institutions in that state. And you come to find out when your child is 17 or 18 years old that, interestingly, after paying taxes all those years in that particular state, that state has paid you back with an insult, which is that your child has a lower chance of getting admitted statistically to your in-state university and therefore benefiting from in-state tuition for 4 years at that undergraduate institution than a student from out of state. I would call that a slap in the face or an insult. Yet there are a number of public institutions in the United States that practice this exact type of first-year admissions. I live in one of those states at present, and this is the state of Maryland. University of Maryland College Park is a college in search of paying customers, and therefore they prioritize accepting out-of-state students over in-state students, at least statistically speaking. And of course, when an out-of-state student matriculates into University of Maryland College Park, the out-of-state students are paying a heftier price for attending than an in-state student would. So it goes to figure that an institution who wants to pocket more money would be very interested, if allowed, in accepting more out-of-state students, if it's a public institution, than in-state students, because the in-state students are going to be paying a much lower sticker price, regardless of whether or not they get need or merit-based. That's a separate issue, of course. Now, of course, most states do not insult their taxpayers or their residents, even if they haven't been really great taxpayers, depending on what their economic station in life is or their situation. Even if you're not paying much in the way of state taxes, if you're a legal resident of a particular state in the United States, many states, Texas, of course, comes to mind first. Florida is another one. North Carolina, others that have very exciting undergraduate institutions in those states often give quite an impressive benefit to getting into that particular college or universities in that state, if they're public, to in-state residents. And therefore, the in-state residents who've been citizens and residents of those states all those years, they can benefit from having a lower cost of attendance to a public institution in their own state than they would benefit from probably going to a public school out of state and a private school out of state, unless, of course, they get merit and or need-based aid at those other institutions. So that's how it is that, frankly, I would argue most of the selective public institutions that exist give benefit to, and statistically, getting into that particular college to in-state residents. You know, there are all different schemes set up, whether it be the Texas top 10% program or, depending on the school, top 6% if it's UT Austin. Obviously, there is history of this happening, of course, in Georgia, Florida, other states as well. Depending on the state, though, that it can go both ways. There are some UC schools where there's a slight edge for out-of-state students, a slight edge for some in-state students, sometimes a bigger edge for in-state students. It really depends on the UC school that we're talking about, but every state's a little bit different. It's ironic, of course, that a high tax state like Maryland, my Maryland, is one in which it's so happy to insult the residents of the state. There is no legislation on offer in Annapolis, Maryland, to do in Maryland what is being done in states across the country like Michigan and Wisconsin and North Carolina and Virginia, right down across the Potomac River, which is to basically give huge preference statistically to, and therefore have frankly lower standards of admission for in-state residents versus out-of-state residents. But it's funny, New York State is another situation where it's not so clear, and it may in fact benefit you to be an out-of-state student again, another hugely high-tax state. UMass, another massively high-tax state. Massachusetts, another high-tax state. It's basically even in terms of acceptance rates between those two, in terms of in-state versus out-of-state. Sort of ironic, right? They can do this, I guess, to their citizenry, their residents, because they get away with a lot of other things. I know in the state of Maryland, where I'm currently located, there seem to be red light cameras on every corner. There seems to be surveillance everywhere. They are always looking to make a dime off of one false move by individuals walking through or driving through or enjoying their way through the state. So it goes to figure that in Maryland, they are willing to completely insult their residents as it relates to the admission to the most selective of the public institutions in the state. Of course, Maryland government officials may come back and say, well, there are, of course, other public institutions in the state of Maryland. Of course, Maryland does have other public institutions. Would you want to go to them? Towson University, Salisbury University, Frostburg University? You may, but you may also have never heard of these institutions, where probably more of those individuals listening to me at this very moment have heard of University of Maryland College Park. There's also another great research institution known as UMBC, also formerly known as UMBEC, but I guess that was considered derogatory, but that is University of Maryland, Baltimore County. So there's a diversity of schools. There's an honors college, St. Mary's College of Maryland. So there are other public colleges and universities in the state of Maryland. I have not even named them all. So Maryland officials could point to those institutions that you can go to also for in-state tuition, but not at Maryland College Park. But why is it at UVA or even William & Mary? There is a huge benefit, frankly, from being an in-state student versus an out-of-state student. Yet in Maryland, not the case at University of Maryland College Park, which frankly is head and shoulders programmatically ahead of all the other public institutions in the state of Maryland. I don't want to pick on Maryland alone. Again, there are some other states that are very good at insulting their residents, but I would say that Maryland is probably very close to the top of the list as it relates to those who may want to get into and pay in-state tuition to University of Maryland College Park. This is, of course, not including any mention of residents of states that are not actually legally residents of states, but are in fact residents of states nonetheless. Every state has its own policies as it relates to whether or not these individuals are considered for in-state tuition or not. Are they actually legal residents of the United States while being a resident of a particular state, and how are those individuals treated? That, of course, is also a patchwork quilt between the states, and therefore that would sort of be another column in that spreadsheet, whether or not to determine whether if you are living in that state, would you qualify for in-state tuition in that state, depending on your legal status within the country of the United States of America. That's a whole other story for a whole other day. But if you are legally in the United States and you have been legally living in a state for a number of years, you would think that that state would want to take care of you and maybe keep you there. But that is not always the case. And that is a case in which I would call an in-state insult. Maybe you want to consider where you should live in your life depending on how that state is going to treat you. And maybe you don't care about that at all, and that's okay as well. But a lot of states do take care of their own, and a lot of states would probably want to maintain the population that it currently has, but a handful of states really could not care less, or those in the state capital have no idea what's going on whatsoever, in which case, and also have no pressure, frankly, from the population who voted them to office, and therefore they have no impetus to potentially give preference to in-state residents applying to that institution. If you happen to live in a state where you are not happy with the current setup as it relates to what is considered in the admissions process vis-a-vis first-year admission and for in-state versus out-of-state expectations, then I would encourage you, whether you're in Florida, Louisiana, Texas, Washington, Alaska, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, Chicago, Illinois, Chicagoland seems like it's a state, but of course it is in Illinois. No matter where you happen to be, New York, New Jersey, talk to your state representative. Share with them your concerns and also talk to them about potential ideas that could make you happier and make you feel as though you are being well taken care of because you are a resident and those individuals work for you. So I would encourage that. If you happen to be in Maryland, I certainly encourage it. Again, my name is Craig Meister. I strongly also encourage you to go to my website, regardless of where you live. Maybe you don't even live in the United States. If you want to work with me for parts of or just throughout the entire college admissions process, that website again is collegemeister.com. If you like this video, I also encourage you to give it a thumbs up and also consider subscribing to my channel. Until next time, I don't want to insult you, so I'm going to say something very nice at the end of this particular video, which is stay safe, stay well, and most importantly, stay stress-free throughout the entire college admissions process.